Welcome to Sable Island Conference 2021, a series of virtual presentations about the natural wonders and human history of this endlessly fascinating island. This is session 3, my water-related interests on Sable Island, presented by Terry Hennigar. I am April Hennigar, Chair of the Board of Directors for Friends of Sable Island, which is a volunteer-run charitable organization dedicated to the long-term protection and preservation of Sable Island. We have held a biannual Sable Island Conference since 2015. The conference was designed as a major fundraiser for our education programs and especially our annual scholarships. We'd hoped to hold an in-person one in 2021, but this proved too difficult with intermittent restrictions on travel and physical gathering sizes. So like Olympics 2020 that was held in 2021, we are presenting Sable Island Conference 2021 in 2022. So have you ever wondered how there can be fresh water on a sandbar widely surrounded by salt water? Terry Hennigar is going to share his experiences of this wild, magical, isolated island in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. In the 1970s, the Nova Scotia Department of Mines sent him to the island to assess the freshwater resources. He will talk about how fascinating he found this place and why it found a special place in his heart. Terry Hennigar is a senior engineer specializing in hydrogeology with over 50 years experience on Canadian and international groundwater resources. He is considered the grandfather of hydrogeology in Nova Scotia. Acadia University recently presented him with an honorary Doctorate of Science degree. He's also my father and is fully responsible for my lifelong obsession with Sable Island. Terry has joined by phone, and I will do my best to keep the slides in sync with his words. Over to you, Terry.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'd like everybody to know that it was a tough old discussion when April called and asked if I would make a presentation today. I always had the presentation ready to go on Sable because it was just one of those projects in your lifetime that you'll never forget. It was just a super experience, not only for me, but I was able to include my family in it as well. Now, the first slide, just for locating everything, the first slide shows Nova Scotia with the Atlantic Ocean in the surrounding area. And just to put it into perspective, Sable Island is not the most southerly point of Nova Scotia. It's at 44 degrees latitude. And if you extend that line across, it'll come across the southwest tip of Nova Scotia, just below Liverpool, between Liverpool and Pubnico. But it is in the middle of the Atlantic, and it's only a short distance from the edge of the continental shelf. And you can see in that slide how steep that slope is. The next slide shows the first aircraft that my family and I were able to get to Sable, and that's a Piper Cub. And I show this because that Piper Cub is a lovely little aircraft, but it just wasn't designed for the sandy conditions that are encountered on Sable. You have to remember, there's no landing strip and there's no wharf on Sable Island. So that aircraft only lasted less than 2 years, and then I had to go to a larger craft. The next slide shows a Britain Islander, which was designed for bush work, really, and offshore work, where it has much bigger tires and it has a slower landing speed, and it'll carry a bigger payload as well. Now, the next slide, as you're flying from Halifax to Sable, we're coming in, it's about 300 kilometers from Halifax to Sable. And as we're approaching the island, we're flying over the West Spit. And in this diagram, or this picture, on the very bottom, you can see something in the sand. That's a drill rig. And as you move up a little bit, there's another thing in the sand, and that is another drill rig. This is now 73, 74. And as you go up further, you'll see some land. And I'm going to show you that land again, closer up. But before we go further up, just make a note of the bare sand between the two drill rigs, okay? Because this slide shows what it looks like now. It's not bare sand at all. It's all grass. Not only is it grass, but there's dunes that have developed. And the elevations of those dunes since the 70s, they're now up to over 10 meters. That's over 30 feet, 33 feet. And there's a long story behind how that developed, and I'm going to get to a little bit of it. Now, the spit was where the drilling took place. And at the end of the dune system in the 70s, this shows the mobile base camp. The building on the bottom beach is the residence, if you like. They're trailers from Alberta, and the kitchen. And that had the capacity of accommodating up to 75 people. And north of the sand dune, you'll see another building, two buildings. Those are warehouses, and all the other things on the beach there are pieces of equipment. They're either bulldozers or casing or other equipment that's required for well drilling. Now, as we pass over that, we're looking for a place to land. And the first place we find is in the next picture that shows a sandy, flat beach. It used to be Lake Wallace. When we were there in the 70s, that was all lake, but that's filled in over the years. And it's now low, level, and it's damp. You can see the dark color, darker color sand. That's moisture. And when there's moisture in the sand, it's sperm. So vehicles can drive over it. You can walk over it without sinking up to your ankles or your knees in sand. Now the next picture shows where we spent most of our time in the first couple of years, and that's referred to as the West Light. The white buildings on the top of the hill there, it's a storage shed and a building, and that's referred to as the West Light. And then over on the right side of that slide, there's a little, looks like a shed with a red roof, and that's called the Shell Shack, and that's where we stayed the first 2 summers. Not very comfortable, didn't even have running water, let alone hot water. There's no water at all. So we had to carry water from the nearest spring. In any case, that was our home and the kids just loved it. The next picture shows the Overlord of the main weather station. This picture was taken in the early 2013 or something like that. And under the nose of that horse is the garage and storage facility that includes the power plant. There's a diesel generator that generates electricity for the rest of the camp. And under the chest of the horse is the main staff house. And I've got a picture later showing something at the staff house that's of interest. And under the belly of the horse is the officer in command and his house and the weather station. So the horse is very accommodating. They're curious and they like to have the picture taken. So I take as many as I can. Somebody in the group here might want to see pictures of horses, so here you go. The next picture shows a small group of horses down in the center part of the island. And all that purple among the green vegetation, that's heather. That's heather, and it flourishes out there. It's a beautiful plant. Most of it's purple, but occasionally you find some white heather. And we brought some of that home. And my wife, Heather, has some of Sable Island heather growing in her garden. And she treasures that, and so do I. The next picture shows cranberries. And cranberries grow in the wet areas, and they great crops. And the history of the island talks about people harvesting cranberries by the bushel after bushel, and shipping them into the mainland for sale. Now, none of these things will grow without water, of course. Now, I got to talk a little bit about water because that's what I was sent out there for. And the next picture shows our son, Alan, standing next to a bucket full of concrete. And right in the center of that concrete is a little brass plug that's referred to in surveying terms as a benchmark. And that has been established in 1963, about 7 or 8 years before we got there. And the purpose was to record the elevation of that point above sea level. So I was making reference to that and 3 other benchmarks throughout the island to determine just what the elevations of the water table is or was, and how it varies with respect to sea level. Now here's another picture of a horse, and this is an early morning shot. And this is a pond that's a perennial pond. It's always there, although the water level might change a little bit. And that's in contrast to what we call ephemeral ponds, the ones that go dry in the summer. And I'll talk a little more about that later as well. So that's a young horse having breakfast. And there's I'm not sure if it's a mare or the stallion of the herd having some water lilies for breakfast. And they seem to love those. That's all fresh water, by the way. Now, sometimes those ponds, not these ones you just saw, but some ponds in the island go dry in the summer, depending on the amount of precipitation and so on earlier. And when a horse is used to drinking from a particular spot, they keep going back to it for water. And when there's no water during one of these dry times, they dig for water. They dig their own well. Pretty smart, eh? And when you look at that horse, you can see the light brown sand on the bottom, but right under the animal, around the animal, you notice how it's a darker brown? That's moisture in the sand. He's getting close to the water table. And the next side will show you that horse having a drink from that well he just dug. And the stallion will always have the first drink. And then he'll step away and let the mare, lead mare, have her drink. And when she's satisfied, she steps away, and then the horses take their turn and have a drink of water. Now, in another day, that well may be dry if the water level is still falling from lack of rain. The next picture shows a pond system and all the trails leading from around the pond, from around the area towards the pond. And those are trails that the horses use to get to their source of water. Now you might begin to wonder, that's pretty innocent stuff and mild and tame, but Sable is exposed to some pretty heavy winds and tides. And the next picture shows cable ferry that was used by Mobil Oil to bring the heavy equipment and vehicles to the island. And while that was unloading, up comes a big storm, and the wind was from the west, blowing against it, and you can see the waves that are piling up against the ship. A lot of energy there, and there's so much sand deposited around the ship. It took over 2 weeks to clean it away after the storm subsided. And it took every ounce and every piece of machinery available on the island, from backhoes to bulldozers, to pull that or push that off of the sandbar at the next high tide. And then it was on its way again. But it's a good demonstration of how fierce a nice windy day can get on Sable. The next picture shows precipitation rates this is these are the major the highs and the lows during a period from the 70s, from 1970 to 2011. The blue line shows the maximum precipitation in 1986, and that shows as over 1,800 milliliters, whereas the red line shows the total precipitation in 2007 of 900 and some millimeters. So you see that sort of variation that's almost double during the maximum. So those are the summers where the ponds would always be full of water or have water, and the red seasons would be when horses really have to dig. The next picture, excuse me, the next picture shows the cross section. And this is why that benchmark is so important I talked about earlier. We drilled a series of holes of a profile, a straight line from the south shore across to the north shore. It's about almost a kilometer across. And I measured the depth of the wells and the water level in those wells. And we also took water samples. Now, the interesting thing about this is that although that's a straight line showing sea level, it's not a straight line. The center of that in test hole 19 is about a meter above sea level. And that's about 3 feet. And that was the maximum water level on the island, about a meter above sea level. And then you can see that the freshwater lens is about 30 times that, 30, 35 times that, before it gets into the underlying salt water. The other thing I want you to note is around test hole 25 and 26. Those were drilled on top of the dune. Okay, and the next picture will show you what happens over time. That dune system was completely eroded, and those steel pipes sticking out of the ground are what was steel casing that we installed with screens on the bottom to sample the water. And if you look at the dune system in the background, it's right out on the beach level. All that area between that dune and where I'm standing has been washed away by probably one or several major storm surges. Now, sand, when it blows, sand blows everywhere. And the next picture shows how high it might be. My first time out in 2013, I stayed in the staff house, the second floor. And the first night when I went to bed, I opened the window so I had some fresh air. When I woke up in the morning, I had fresh air. I also had sand under my pillow and in the bed. And so I took a picture of the little trough there in the windowsill that's full of sand. And there is sand all over the floor. What a mess. So that's close to 20 feet in the air, and sand is blowing that high. Normally it's only knee high or waist high when it's in a storm, but it can go that high. Now the next slide shows another freshwater pond just south of the main station.
Well,
And that
an hour. I think that they did it all over Saturday.
I beg your pardon? We're going to have questions later, okay? And this picture just shows another horse with the wind turbines in the background. And those turbines were put in the 90s, and they were taken out again, I guess, shortly after. Now, walking down the beach through soft sand, or through the dunes in soft sand, it's tiring. And we didn't take any lawn chairs with us to take a break, but we found a suitable resting place. It's a part of the a whale bone system, and they're very comfortable. Unfortunately, there are only 2 seats. One guy had to stand up. Speaking of horses, one day we were, just my buddy and I, there's 2 of us, we came across this horse in the early summer, and it was in trouble. And we tried to approach it, and we did approach it. He seemed to sense that we might be there to help him. So we roped him and encouraged him to lie down. And my buddy held his head, and he didn't try to get up. He didn't fight or anything. While I cut away that part of the mane and the knot and freed his foot. And while he was down and I had his leg free, I massaged his leg and moved his leg, because I don't know how long he had been this way. But he was obviously in distress, and we just couldn't walk by and have him continue that way. So after about an hour of massaging and encouragement, we stepped aside, took the rope off him, and he stood up. He didn't walk away, he didn't run away. He kind of looked back at us and nodded his head, as much as say, "Thank you, boys." And he continued walking down the beach, and we went on our way to get some work done. The next picture shows the house that was down at the East Light. And this was a residence during the old days. And even during the 70s and 80s, it was a house used as a residence for research scientists. And while we were there, it was Danny Welch who was doing his PhD on the horses. That house is gone, completely buried. Now, I mentioned the growth of the West Spit, from bald sand to grass and dunes. This is how you start a dune system. You put in snow fencing, and this fencing was built because during storm surges, water would come from the left into the area and flood different ponds. So we wanted to protect that pond system from salt water. So we built the snow fences, raised the level 4 feet, and I don't know if it's continued to build or not. I haven't been back. The other things of interest out there are the birds, of course, and Sable Island is known as home of the Ipswich sparrow. And this is a nest that April found one day, and after taking the picture, we left the site so we didn't disturb the mama and the papa. Then we went to another site. This is the old main station. This is the house that Thomas Radell lived in during the 1920s when he was there. And it shows Heather and Alan and Crystal and April in the red shirt. And that house is now completely buried. And the next picture shows that house from the air, and another building off to the left, a white building. That's the house that the base camp that I set up there in 1973. This is a close-up of it, showing the garage with a truck of the day. And on the right side of the 2-plex building is the kitchen and the bathroom and the bedroom. And on the left side, out front, is my office, and in the back is a bedroom with bunk beds. Now, just of interest, my office was facing south. And when I communicate with the land, my contact was through Department of Lands and Forests, where I could arrange a telephone call. But every morning when I called, the lady in the Department of Highway or Lands and Forests camp would ask how things are in Sable this morning. And I said, "Oh, it's a beautiful morning. It's sunny, clear." And I said, if I could get up on the roof of this building, I'll bet I could see Venezuela. She didn't know if I could or not. But anyway, I had to sort that out because I didn't want to mislead her too bad. But that was a lovely setting. It was a lovely building, and it was warm in the winter. And it didn't get hot in the summer either. Now I'm showing this picture because it shows the vegetation in front and a lot of dune up back, a lot of bare sand. This is the Green Plains, and it's lots of vegetation for horses, and it's the most extensive piece of grassland on the island. Now the next picture shows some folks standing on the beach and some folks coming ashore in a small motor craft, and a big boat sitting out back. That's Discovery Canada, and that was in 1917. Now, there are two of us there from Sable, friends of Sable, Jill Martin and I. We were hired as guides. She did one thing and I did another. And the next picture shows one of the highlights of, other than the horses, of course, but the other highlight was the Bald Dune. And that's shown here. And I point this out because the upper part of that photo is a lighter brown color than the bottom part. Now, the upper part of that Bald Dune is about 20 meters above sea level, whereas the lower part, and you can see the change in color, slightly darker, that's within a meter of the water table. And that's stable. You can walk on that, no problem at all. While we're out there with Discovery Canada, we did some other beach combing, and of all the things that wash up on the beach there is just remarkable. Everything from fishing tackle, old lobster pots, rope, and all kinds of stuff. Plastic, tons and tons of plastic. Everything from plastic pop bottles, plastic rum bottles, to glass rum bottles, gin bottles, whatever. London gin seemed to have been a popular one. But this picture shows not only a very durable piece of hard plastic, but it'll take centuries for that to decompose or degrade. And the knife, the pen knife in the bottom there gives you some scale. So after my last time there with April, it was to do a treasure, or what do you call it, a video, and it was done by Rayanne LaPlante, and it's called Sable Island, the Beauty of the Free. And as we were leaving that day, this picture shows Maritime Air Charter, which is under a different name now, and I think April will give you that. And that just shows the loading it. And on the way back, I was a passenger. April was the co-pilot. Then we got back to Halifax very safely. And a parting shot of Sable is an evening shot on the South Beach. And the next picture shows the end with a thank you for your interest in Sable Island and the Friends of Sable. And we leave Sable in the hands of Parks Canada. Take care. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm here in a snowstorm. I ain't going nowhere. Take care.
Thank you, Terry, for sharing. Thank you, Terry, for sharing what makes Sable Island so special to you. For those watching the recording, if you like what you heard, please consider a small charitable donation towards our scholarship program. For those attending the live session, we will stop recording now and take some questions.
What is it?
And hear some more personal stories.